The Nintendo 3DS eShop is shutting down on March 27th, 2023, meaning that after that date, you will no longer be able to make purchases and download software from the eShop. If you're watching this video after that date, maybe you could mod your DS to get something you missed out on. If you're watching the video before that date, then you have at most a little under 2 months to get everything you need from the eShop before it's gone forever. I'll link to this in the description, but this is Nintendo's explanation as to why the eShop is shutting down, and they answer a few questions here like what happens after March 27th. For example, you can still access online play for your games, download updates, re-download software you've already purchased, and you'll even still be able to get a small number of free themes from the theme shop. In this video, I'll be going over what I think are some of the most important pieces of software to download while you still have a chance to obtain them legitimately. Firstly, as of May of last year, it is no longer possible to add funds to your 3DS account, and at the end of August that same year, you could no longer redeem eShop cards on the 3DS either. There may be some games you want to buy, but before you can do so, you'll need to know how to add funds to your 3DS account. There are two types of Nintendo-related accounts. The first is the Nintendo Network ID. This was used on the Wii U and 3DS family of systems, so you'll need one to download from the eShop anyways. The next account is simply called a Nintendo account, and is used with devices like the Nintendo Switch. You'll need both accounts, and then you'll need to link them together. If you don't have a Nintendo Network ID, I'll leave a link in the description taking you to Nintendo's official guide on how to create one on your 3DS, but you pretty much just need to go to your system settings, then press on Nintendo Network ID settings, and the rest is fairly self-explanatory. I'll also leave a link to a web page where you can create a Nintendo account if you don't have one. When you sign into a Nintendo account on this webpage, you should see a section with your linked accounts, so make sure you link your Nintendo Network ID while you're here. After that, if you go to the store and check your funds, you should see some green text saying funds have been merged, and now when you add funds to your Nintendo account, they will show up on the Nintendo Network ID as well, allowing you to make purchases on the 3DS eShop. With that out of the way, we can now purchase things. So I'm going to start with Pokemon related software since it's big enough to deserve its own section. Obviously, there's Pokemon Bank, which allows you to store and transfer Pokemon between certain games, as well as transfer them up to Pokemon Home. Pokemon Bank requires a subscription to use, but is free to download and will no longer require a subscription after the eShop shuts down. From what I can see, you'll no longer be able to download Pokemon Bank or Poke Transporter after the shutdown, so get them while you can, or you'll never be able to transfer certain Pokemon to the modern games. Poke Transporter is tied to Pokemon Bank, and you'll need it for transferring certain Pokemon from the older games, such as Black and White. But you don't get it from the eShop, you actually download it from within Pokemon Bank itself. It unfortunately seems like if you want Poke Transporter, you'll need to purchase a subscription to Pokemon Bank, as I have not found a way to download Poke Transporter otherwise. Even though both services will be free after the eShop shuts down, you have to have downloaded them already to have access to them. Pokemon Dream Radar is an application that uses the camera and gyroscope of the 3DS and lets you catch certain Pokemon that you can transfer to Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. There's also digital versions of the Generation 1 and 2 Pokemon games that you may want to buy. These are Red, Blue, Yellow, and Gold, Silver, Crystal. These digital versions actually let you transfer Pokemon from these games to places like Pokemon Bank and Home. The Pokemon you transfer from these games even have this unique Game Boy symbol showing where the Pokemon came from, and is technically the only way to transfer a Pokemon from Gen 1 or 2 all the way up to Pokemon Home. You may also really want to take a look at the Pokemon Sun and Moon special demo. This is, as far as I know, the only way to obtain a special Greninja with the ability Battle Bond, which allows it to transform into Ash Greninja. This Pokemon was unlocked through importing save data from the demo to the main game, and it looks like you may even be able to transfer this Pokemon to Scarlet and Violet once Pokemon Home support is added to those games. But this demo will be your only way of getting this special Greninja, so download it while you can. Though I heard it won't transform in the new games, which does kinda suck. You also get a Glalie from the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire demo if you want to check that out. I think that covers most of the important Pokemon stuff, so let's talk about some freebies. There's a few free to start games like Team Kirby Clash Deluxe and Nintendo Badge Arcade. They are free, so you might as well download them if you don't want to miss out on them. They do have microtransactions, but those won't work after the eShop shuts down anyways. Download any demos you may want as well. Some demos let you carry progress over to the main game, while others may unlock special items. Demos are free, and as long as you've started to download them, you should be able to re-download them after the eShop shuts down. But again, that's only if you started to download them before. The RPG Maker Player lets you download and play other people's RPG Maker creations. Swapdoodle lets you draw fun sketches and send notes to your friends. Swapnote also exists and does most of the same stuff, but I think Swapdoodle is better. Mario Party Star Rush Party Guest Edition allows you to connect to someone that owns the full version of the game and play all multiplayer modes with them. I've also found 3 different save data utilities you can download for free. The first is the Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate Save Transfer app, which allows you to transfer save data from the 3DS version of this game to the Nintendo Switch version. The second is the Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate Data Transfer Program, which lets you transfer save data from the Wii U version of this game to the 3DS version. The last is simply the Save Data Transfer Tool, which gives you the ability to transfer saves from the physical cartridge of a game to the downloadable version. This is useful since when I lived with my sister, we used to share some 3DS games together like Ocarina of Time 3D, and she currently has a physical cartridge of that game, but with this application, I could take the save from that cartridge and buy the game digitally if I wanted to, allowing me to continue playing that same save file. Overall, it's a pretty useful utility, and I download it anyways even if you don't see any use for it. If I missed any good freebies, just feel free to let people know in the comments. I'm going to talk about games next, but it's worth noting that there are actually plenty of 3DS games that were exclusively available for download from the eShop. This means that once the eShop is shut down, some of these games will disappear for good. I'll include a link in the description for every digital-only title that was available on the North American 3DS eShop, though if you live in a different region, it shouldn't be too difficult for you to find lists for that region. Some of the games on that list are technically available on other platforms in some capacity, like the Sega 3D Classics. It's not like you'll never be able to play Sonic 2 on a different system, but this version has 3D to some effect. Then there's games like Dylan's Rolling Western, which as far as I'm aware, once the eShop shuts down, that game is potentially gone for good. There's 434 eShop exclusive titles on the North American store, and that's a lot of potentially good games gone too soon. I'm not even sure how accurate the list is, since I didn't see any mention of a game like 3D Classics Excitebike, which is pretty much just a 3DS port of Excitebike with some 3D functionality. It's still an eShop exclusive though, and wasn't mentioned anywhere on this list, so keep an eye out for any outliers like that. There's also the Virtual Console. Not going to go too much into it here, but you can purchase classic games and play them on the 3DS. These include games from systems like the NES, Game Boy, and Super Nintendo, but the Super Nintendo games only work on the new 3DS family of systems. Next up, let's just talk about some good 3DS games that I highly recommend. You can't go wrong with some Zelda games. I didn't really play Triforce Heroes myself since I didn't have any friends that would be interested in playing that game with me, but you do have 3DS remasters of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask available, which are highly regarded as some of the best Zelda games ever. There's also A Link Between Worlds, which is a 3DS exclusive and honestly one of my favorite games on the system. I know we covered Pokemon, but if you want to buy the main series games like Sun and Moon digitally, then maybe go for it. Pokemon games always seem to creep up in price over the years, and I don't think you'll get these games on sale anytime soon, so if you really want to go for it, I'm not going to stop you. Metroid Samus Returns is a remake of Metroid 2 and is straight up just a fantastic game that you shouldn't miss out on. Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D is the 3DS port of the Wii game, but it has new levels and gets rid of motion controls, so people consider this the superior version. Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King, this is one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. The 3DS version includes some extra content like new playable characters not found in any other version, so it's definitely worth taking a look at. Lots of Mario games to take a look at here as well. The ones that I recommend the most are going to be Super Mario 3D Land, New Super Mario Bros. 2, and Mario Kart 7. If you ever see a physical copy of Sticker Star, feel free to burn it, and once the eShop shuts down forever, nobody will ever have to remember that monstrosity ever existed. WarioWare Gold is probably the best WarioWare game to date. And you can't go wrong with Animal Crossing New Leaf if you want a nice chill game to relax to. Super Smash Bros. For 3DS has unique stages and modes like Smash Run, which don't appear in other Smash games. It also lets you use the 3DS as a controller to play Smash Bros. For Wii U, or you could download the Smash Controller application on the eShop for like $1. Rhythm Heaven Mega Mix has tons of charm and is a really solid rhythm game. Kid Icarus Uprising is underplayed. Not underrated, it got pretty good review scores, but not many people actually played it. It's got a weird control scheme, but it works well enough when you get used to it, and it's actually a really fun adventure. Pushmo is a fun little puzzle game, definitely worth a play. So is Crushmo, the sequel to Pushmo. The 3DS also has lots of Ace Attorney and Professor Layton games. These were always more my sister's thing, so I haven't played too many of them. I believe you can get most of the Ace Attorney games on other platforms these days, but I'm not so sure about Professor Layton. I think those may be a little more exclusive. Physical copies of Fantasy Life are getting ever so slightly harder to track down, at least for a decent price, and this is a fun little life sim RPG that I personally enjoyed. And if you've got a 3DS, then you kinda owe it to yourself to play Tomodachi Life. You make a bunch of Miis, then you just kinda watch them do the weirdest stuff. It's great, honestly. Codename Steam is like a steampunk XCOM, and you can even use amiibos to unlock Fire Emblem characters to play as. Speaking of Fire Emblem, I want to talk about those games next, but they also bleed into our next topic, so before I get into that, I just want to mention that I'll put a link in the description to the top 100 3DS games sorted by their Metacritic score in case you want to take a look at that. Most of the games I mentioned are a part of that list, but there's also plenty that I didn't cover, like the Shin Megami Tensei games, Luigi's Mansion, Bravely Default, stuff like that. All games worth looking into at least. But yes, of course we have Fire Emblem. If you've recently gotten into the series with games like Engage or Three Houses, then the 3DS line of Fire Emblem games is a pretty good spot to pick up on, if you want to see what the rest of the series has to offer. They have some of the conveniences of modern Fire Emblem games like a casual mode, and Echoes is the game that introduced the ability to rewind a few turns to undo mistakes. Fire Emblem Fates is where things get interesting since that game was a split between 3 different versions, almost like a Pokemon game. You have Conquest, Birthright, and Revelations. Each version has a unique story and different gameplay elements. Revelations is unique in the sense that you can only purchase it as DLC for either Conquest or Birthright. If you own one of those games, you can also purchase the other version as DLC for half price. So this gets us talking about DLC, as not only does each Fire Emblem game have DLC, but many other games on the 3DS have DLC as well. After the eShop shuts down, you won't be able to purchase any DLC, meaning that something like Fire Emblem Fates Revelations will be unobtainable after a certain point unless you can track down the special edition of Fates, which currently goes for hundreds of dollars. I really wanted to buy this when it was announced, but they sold out incredibly fast. Now these cartridges will probably only go up in price after the eShop shuts down too. The Season Pass for Fire Emblem Echoes costs more than the base game does. Super Smash Bros. For 3DS has DLC containing new characters and stages. If you want to take a look, there's actually a section on the eShop for games with DLC. There's surprisingly few of them here, actually. But the point remains, if any of these games have DLC you want, then you'll need to download it before it's gone. You can't download the DLC from the eShop either, it seems. Instead, you have to start up the game and access some DLC shop option from within there. Again, I recommend at least getting Fire Emblem Fates Revelations. Fates just doesn't feel complete without it, and it offers a full campaign, compared to the Fire Emblem Echo Season Pass, which costs more than the base game does and offers much less content than the base game itself. Overall, there's quite a lot of stuff to download, and thankfully once you've purchased and downloaded something, you'll still have the ability to re-download it, even after the eShop closes. If you're into Pokemon, there are several Pokemon that will become more rare, especially for people that didn't download Pokemon Bank. Certain 3DS games are already tricky to track down physical copies for a decent price, so once the digital copies go away, the remaining physical copies will slowly start to creep up in price over time. When I was recommending games, this was one thing I neglected to mention. As good of a game as something like Super Mario 3D Land is, it's also still really easy to track down a physical copy, and they sell for cheap too. More popular 3DS games will have easy to obtain physical copies for a long while, so don't feel pressured to buy those digitally. Make a personal list of 3DS games you're interested in, and if you want to buy them digitally, then go for it. But see if you can track down some physical copies for cheaper first. eShop exclusive games may be lost forever once the eShop closes, so take an extra long look at those games specifically. There's also games that have DLC. Some games don't feel complete without it, and once it's gone, there's no legitimate way to get that stuff on your 3DS if you ever wanted it. The 3DS has a decent chunk of free goodies that you may as well download just so that you can have access to re-downloading them later. There's also themes to check out at the theme shop. I assume you won't be able to purchase themes once the eShop shuts down, though you'll still be able to download some of the free themes. If there's a particular piece of software I neglected to mention that you feel strongly about, then by all means leave a comment to let others know about it. In the meantime, I believe I covered most of the important things, so if you enjoyed the video, then thank you. I appreciate you and everything you do. Ciao.